any actual solutions found. So we're in that sort of grey area where actually, if we knew that simply single-use plastic bags were going to be the answer to whatever it was, then we'd all be getting behind that and doing it. But we haven't. Somebody was making the really interesting allusions the other day toward the hole in the ozone, where the wonderful thing about that was that all you had to do was to take whatever the chemical was out of refrigerators, and the hole in the ozone started to...
Problem found.
And that's not what we're...
Yeah.
So everybody said, great, let's give up those... fluorocarbons, and we can all get behind this. That's not the situation. I think people are getting tired.
What's your take on that, Victoria? Is there a sense of fatigue? You think, oh God, I want a steak. I get sick and tired of being told what to do. No.
Climate change, I think, is a reality, and if people are still going on about it, it's because we haven't found solutions, and it is happening. So until we resolve it, until things start to improve, we're going to keep hearing about it, and we just need to accept it as a fact of life and actually change how we live our lives.
But do you think there's actually some people out there who are, in fact, finding it wearying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But... yeah, I don't have the answer to what you do. Do we just stop talking about it because people are tired of it?
Oh no, absolutely not. And there's no reason to do any of that.
All right. Nita says, on hospitality, worked the majority of my life in hospitality, Wallace. Definitely agree, humbling sometimes, yet the people one gets to work with most become true friends and family. And when dine out, totally respect all who wait on me. So there you go. Quote in the movie Made in Manhattan, we may serve these people, however, they are no better than us. So a wonderful text, Anita, so thank you very much for sending that to us. Just this briefly, this caught our attention. I don't know what you can say to this, but look, a small seaside town in Wales caught the attention of international media when its council announced it would be installing public toilets with special anti-sex technology. The device, which was planned on being used, operated through a motion sensor.
Yeah, you're puerile, Wallace.
It's a big issue, which would then enable doors to be open and the cubicle occupiers to be sprayed with water. What do you think, Victoria? Is this something that the Wellington City Council should invest in?
Heaven forbid if you're doing something innocent. Look, I think, we're worried about plates being dirty. Do not shag in a public toilet, for goodness sake.
Good advice.
There's just too many bugs
Good
and dirt.
advice.
Don't do it,
There's
people.
your tweet for the afternoon.
Yeah.
From the partner of Sim and Stewart.
Yeah.
What do you reckon? Is it?
Well, I like in this article. There's the motion sensor is one thing, but there's a broad range of options on how they might detect activity which is inappropriate. Some sound stuff, maybe even some smell stuff. I think it is a look. I think this is a publicity stunt on behalf of this Welsh seaside town. Actually, the weather is rubbish. The sea will have the beach will have stones on it.
The bigger issue is get a room, get a hotel, get an Airbnb. Don't do it in the toilet.
No, but don't you think that the Welsh Seaside Village are trying to use this as a marketing technique to say we are such a lovely place that people are even coming here to shag in the bathrooms?
But people will only go there to shag in the bathrooms.
Oh, okay, that's right. Right. Okay, so there's another way to look at this.
A myriad of opinions on that particular one. Victoria Stewart and Michael Moynihan, you've been fantastic for this Monday afternoon. Thank you very much for being with us. So, Wallace Chapman, see you tomorrow from 3:45pm. Bye.
Okay.
Mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, our suicide rate continues to climb and Māori are dying at more than twice the rate of Pākehā. The Māori Council boss goes rogue to highlight what he calls a national crisis and a complete failure. What should we do? Hundreds of mainly young fans celebrate with the Silver Ferns at Parliament. Should we raise the age for superannuation to 67? Ridiculous, says Grey Power. Desperate foreign students are left high and dry as their school calls in the liquidators. We meet the female inmates graduating from drug rehab in jail, and Sir Roger Hall pays tribute to veteran actor Ray Henwood, who has died aged 82.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. New figures show Maori suicide rates have reached a record high. Nationally, there were 685 suicides in the year to June, 17 more than last year, also the highest rate. Manny Dunlop reports.
The new statistics are being described as a national disgrace. There has been a dramatic 20% increase in the number of those with Māori whakapapa who have died, 27 more from the year before. The Māori Council says it is a tragedy and a complete failure by successive governments, and says the current government has failed in its promises to address it. The increase in the number of young people aged 15 to 19 years old dying by suicide was particularly high, going from 53 to 73. For those aged between 20 and 24, there was also a significant increase. Ko Manny Dunlop tēnei.
The superannuitants group Grey Power is calling the National Party's promise to raise the pension age to 67 if elected into government ridiculous. The party today said it would go ahead with rising the super age by 2037 if elected to government next year. Grey Power's president Mac Welsh says the party better be prepared for a backlash.
It's a ridiculous idea, and I think it will go against them very badly in the polls. I'm really disappointed that the National Party hasn't at least consulted with Grey Power before they made that decision, because we normally have, I would think, a fairly good relationship with the National Party. John Key's firm commitment, it would be over his dead body that the pension age increased.
Grey Power's president, Mac Welsh. The government will next week lay out its reset plan for its failed KiwiBuild program. The former Housing Minister Phil Twyford promised 1,000 KiwiBuild homes would be complete by July, then 5,000 by next year, then 12,000 a year each year until 2029. In June, the Prime Minister stripped Mr Twyford of the role, handing it over to Megan Woods, who will announce the details of the reset next Wednesday. Jacinda Ardern says KiwiBuild is just one part of the government's housing policy.
We need to keep trying to stimulate the building of affordable homes. KiwiBuild's part of that. We know there are things we need to get fixed to make that a more effective program, and that's what the KiwiBuild Reset's about.
Jacinda Ardern. The number of confirmed cases of measles has jumped 21% to 770. The number of hospitalizations has also jumped to more than 280, and there are still 4 ongoing outbreaks. Katie Doyle reports.
The latest figures show 132 new cases were reported last week, and most of those are in Auckland. County's Manukau had a sharp increase with 103 reported cases, up 26 from the week before. It continues to be the worst affected area. In the last week, 37 children and babies under the age of 3 years were hospitalised with the infection. Health authorities and the ESR are continuing their calls for people to ensure they are fully vaccinated. Ko Katie Doyle tēnei.
A South Auckland leader says the community needs support to address growing violence in the area. There have been 4 fatal shootings in the area since March, with a fatal assault in Otahuhu on Saturday night. Community leader and neighbourhood support coordinator for Manurewa, Colleen Brown, says the violence has reached problem levels. She says people who are disconnected from society need help to be brought back into the community.
There's a massive heart here in the South, and that needs to be celebrated and supported. So if organisations could be given some kind of government funding to do the things that we know we can do well and support particularly our young people, then that is a step in the right direction.
Colleen Brown. World leaders at the G7 summit in France have been discussing what to do about the man-made fires ravaging vast parts of Brazil's rainforests. And the final day of the meeting, discussion will focus on a French initiative to halt the destruction in the east of the country, where the area affected has doubled over the weekend. The BBC's James Landale reports.
For President Macron, the Amazon forest fires are a crisis the G7 was designed to fix, a common threat to the environment that requires collective action by the world's major economies. He and other leaders will discuss a new plan to help countries first with the fires and then subsequent reforestation. The French president said the G7 was close to a deal, providing technical and financial help. President Bolsonaro of Brazil has accused foreign governments of interfering in the sovereignty of his country. The G7 is divided over whether to block an EU trade deal with some South American countries if they don't take more action to tackle fires lit deliberately by loggers and farmers.
James Landale reporting. A boil water notice in the Marlborough town of Seddon has been lifted after being in place for 20 years. This morning, Nelson Marlborough Health agreed to lift the notice following the completion of a series of checks. Marlborough District Council Chief Executive Mark Wheeler says it is a monumental milestone for the people of Seddon. A modern water treatment plant opened in March this year, but the boil notice remained in place until today. It's 5:05. World Cup winning Silver Ferns netball coach Nolene Taurua has moved to ease concerns she could be lost to the sport. Taurua's contract with the side ended when the side upset Australia in the World Cup final in Liverpool last month. She has re-signed only for October's Constellation Cup Series and the Northern Quad Series in January. At a public reception in Wellington for the World Champions, Taurua said even if she doesn't carry on as Silver Ferns coach, she's likely to stay involved in the sport in some way.
Netball's been a big part of my life and will be right throughout, and unfortunately you sort of can't walk away because it's in the bones, but as to what role that would be moving forward, I'm uncertain, but I always know that I've got skin in the game anyway, so would be always around to support.
Nolene Taurua. Newly appointed All Whites coach Danny Hay doesn't see the job as a stepping stone to bigger and brighter things in the footballing world. Several of Hay's predecessors have viewed the role that way. The 44-year-old Hay played for New Zealand for 11 years and says he's committed to the job long term, which has gone down well with many of his former teammates.
They're just excited that there's now somebody in place that doesn't see our national team as a stepping stone, somebody that genuinely cares about it, somebody that's passionate about it, and somebody that understands what it means to play for the shirt.
Danny Hay. Black Caps batsman Colin de Grandhomme has been dismissed for 83, holing out in the deep on just the second ball of the last day of play in the second and final cricket test between New Zealand and Sri Lanka in Colombo. A short time ago, New Zealand were 392 for 6, giving them a first innings lead of 148 with BJ Watling on 90. Sri Lanka lead the series 1-0. That's the news.
Missing the mark.
This shouldn't have happened. I absolutely agree. This should not have happened, and it's my job now and my responsibility to fix it and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Back on the bike.
3 months ago, I could only ride the motocross bike for about 5 minutes, and that was me.
Ashes heroics.
Ben Stokes hit 135 not out. He got England over the line when they had absolutely no right to do so.
All the action, morning reports weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Then on 9 to noon, a call for all prisoners on remand to have their hearing tested. Barrister and youth advocate Kingi Snelgar explains why. And after 10, capturing wildlife with multi-award-winning cameraman Gavin Thurston, who's even had a pat on the back from a silverback gorilla. Join me, Lynn Freeman, in for Catherine Ryan on 9 to noon after morning report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Showers becoming isolated towards the evening, clearing by tomorrow afternoon. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine tonight, showers spreading north tomorrow. Waikato to Taranaki, including Taumaranui and Taupo, isolated showers, fine spells increasing tomorrow. Whanganui to Kapiti, including Taihape, Wairarapa and Nelson. Occasional showers clearing Nelson this evening and elsewhere by tomorrow afternoon. Then mainly fine. For Wellington, Marlborough and Canterbury, showers spreading north this evening, clearing from the south overnight, then fine weather. Bulla to Fiordland, also Stewart Island, isolated showers more widespread in Fiordland tomorrow. For Otago and Southland, showers retreating to the coast tonight, becoming fine tomorrow morning. And Chatham Island, showers at times, possibly heavy this evening. You're with RNZ National, it's 9 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Suicide rates have risen yet again, with 685 people dying by suicide in the past year. That's 17 more lives lost. The number of Maori taking their own lives has increased 19% on the year previous. And the Maori suicide rate is more than twice the rate of New Zealand Europeans. Here's the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern.
There is no question that our suicide rate is too high. There is no question that as a government we have to put our all into turning that around. It is one of our biggest long-term challenges as a nation, not just as a government, as a nation. But I ask the question as to whether or not a target would have the effect of causing that number to go down. And no one could produce any evidence to me that a target would do that. And I was concerned, and so was Cabinet, that a target implies that we have a tolerance for suicide, and we do not. And so that is why we made the decision that we will continue to focus as a government, as a country, on bringing that rate down. But for us, of course, the goal has to be no one lost to suicide.
These provisional figures were supposed to be released by the Chief Coroner at midday tomorrow, but the Māori Council forced the Justice Ministry's hand by breaking the embargo and going public with the figures. It says they are a national disgrace. Joining me now is Matthew Tukaki, who is the Executive Director of the Māori Council and who is the man who released the figures today. Can we start with that, Matthew? Why did you break the embargo and put these figures in the public domain ahead of time?
So, first of all, I fundamentally believe, and the Māori Council fundamentally believes, that these are the stories of our people, and not only our people, all New Zealanders. What's happened over the last week is that the Ministry of Justice has managed to distribute this sort of data to mental health service providers, organisations and individuals. And by the end of last week, I formed the view that what was happening here was the creation of a narrative to try and dumb down what the truth of the data was telling us. So I wasn't involved in the distribution of that data or that information from the Ministry of Justice, nor was the Māori Council, but it was provided to us. After a hui this morning with Sereti Jury, the Chairman of Māori Council, the Deputy Chair of Māori Council and myself, we decided it was time to act. And it was time to act because we need to give our people, give all New Zealanders the firm understanding here that the data in absence of a plan, and I hear what the Prime Minister's said, Lisa, I really have. I'm not a great believer in the setting of these targets as well. I mean, I'm the former Chairman of Suicide Prevention Australia. I know this sort of thing really well and back to front. But where is the plan? And here's the reality of the situation we face. New Zealand has been without a national suicide prevention strategy and plan since 2016. It has been the failure of the previous government, and we're now moving into a rolling train wreck of a failure not only for Māori but all New Zealanders, again in the absence of a plan.
So, just to be clear, you thought they were going to spin these figures, is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, I thought they were going to spin these figures, and that realisation has proved to be accurate when we've seen a plethora of now press releases coming on the tailcoat of the Ministry of Justice and the Chief Coroner's release of the data not too long ago. It always makes me, quite cynical when I see the press releases all time to go at the same time. Now, obviously, it wasn't necessarily my intention to force the Chief Coroner into a corner or a position, but here's the thing. 10 minutes after the release of the data from the Māori Council, from me, we received a phone call from the Ministry of Justice making threats. Now,
what kind of threats?
I said to them, first of all, they said, how dare we release judicial information? How dare we do this? How dare we do that? And I said, well, hang on, what are you telling me? Are you telling me that you will arrest me? Are you telling me that you will prosecute both myself and the New Zealand Māori Council? And then as we went through this conversation, I discovered that this was a member of the Ministry of Justice's media unit. Well, I'm sorry, media unit, you do not get to shape a narrative around what is a rolling feast of a national crisis when it comes to suicide.
Okay.
And let me just point out, if I may just quickly, we are now talking about the Māori suicide rate per head of population jumping a massive 5% per 100,000 population. Now, to put that in a global context, we are now leading that trophy cabinet. And for my people and for our whānau right across the country, and I dare say I would speak for all New Zealanders on this issue, that is not a trophy anyone wants in their cabinet.
So who has let Māori down then, specifically?
Yeah, first of all, I would go right back to the previous national government. It was under the stewardship of the minister then, Jonathan Coleman, and I remember having conversations with Jonathan in November of 2016, putting forward recommendations on how we might shape this plan together, and not just me, myself, and Jonathan Coleman, but Maori in general, and it was knocked back comprehensively.
But you have a new government now, Matthew, and they have put $1.9 billion in the budget going towards mental health services, including $445 million for frontline staff and services, where they hope to see about 325,000 people go through that system. They are throwing big dollars at this.
Are they? Are they throwing big dollars at what? What is the plan? There is no national suicide prevention strategy. There is no obvious investment at the moment in building a workforce, for example, that is fit, willing and able to respond to what is obviously not only a national crisis, but the demand of people seeking help. There is no workforce development strategy. There is no service delivery model. And by the way, mental health is not the only thing going on here. Suicide, and it is proven by the evidence and research right around the world, is not just about those people with a pre-diagnosed or diagnosable mental health condition. It's also about people who are facing the daily struggles of life, relationship breakdowns, homelessness, all of these different things that ultimately end in depression, anxiety, and the ultimate sad decision around town. So, yes, I understand that the government have said they're going to put all of this money into addressing this problem. It's actually not the money. The money has come too soon. What we need to be doing, and need to be doing quickly, is investing in an actual plan. What is the plan?
So you want a commission, and you suggest that there could be two commissioners, including a Maori commissioner. Are you standing by that? You want that?
Absolutely, I'm standing by that. We have had 2 years of discussion and talk. We've had a mental health and addictions inquiry that spurted out a range of recommendations, and yet 2 years ago, and I remember sitting down with David Clarke, the minister, at the beginning of his ministry and outlining that suggested approach. It was a very simple approach. In order to get change within the system, let's set up that mental health commission. To enable us to set that up, we need to make amendments to decouple the Director of Mental Health Services out of the Act and create a new organisation. That could have been in place now 18 months ago. Now, that has not happened. Now, having a Māori Commissioner of Mental Health is also very much about targeting investment and targeting focus on Māori-led and co-designed programs of work that relate to our people in our communities, because we do have a very, very high suicide rate.
Right. You have also said, Matthew, there's a bit to get through, but
I get passionate.
I can understand that. So you would have heard the Prime Minister saying, with regards to setting a reduction target for suicide, she is not a fan. You want a zero tolerance policy, which in essence is a target, but it's a reduction to zero target.
Yeah, let me just explain that point. I am with the Prime Minister. I mean, I'm the one that set a 50% reduction target in Australia, for example, a few years back now. And the lesson from that is very clear. It sends the wrong message. What the zero suicide target looks like, though, is within the hospital system. And what should be happening is that no New Zealander should be entering a hospital system in New Zealand and still exit and still end up taking their life. So the zero suicide target is definitely around the hospital system, of which we're able to control the environment. What we also need to be doing is focusing our time and effort on having a look at programs that are fit for purpose for other population groups. So if we have a look at the volume rate of suicide, obviously it is middle-aged white males or Pākehā males, for example. We can do a lot more work in that area. We can do a lot more work in self-delivery and co-design or Māori-led design for Māori communities, and so on and so forth. So it's about having a look at how do we swallow an elephant? Not that I advocate swallowing elephants, of course, but how do we have a cross-population group strategy? And that's why I keep on coming back.
How
you
likely,
can put all the money into it you want, but if you don't have a plan, we've got nowhere to go.
How likely are you to get any of this now? Because what have you achieved today? You've just annoyed a bunch of people in government and the ministry that you're trying to get on side.
Well, actually, no. What I've done today, I've aggrieved three groups of people. I've aggrieved a whole lot of service providers that make a huge amount of money from the sector. We're talking about $1 billion industry. Yes, I have annoyed the heck out of the Ministry of Health and obviously some people in government. But my message to the Prime Minister on this issue is it's not about you, Prime Minister. It's not necessarily about the policies you've announced. What I'm trying to say is we have been on a rolling train wreck of suicide data in this country for more than a decade. This is a record level of suicides in the country. It's about the responsibility of those governments that have been inactive on this issue in the past, but it's also the responsibility of the current government to let's do something. Now, what does that look like? Do we keep on sticking to the same old narrative? You know what? If I hadn't have done what I did today, we would have got to tomorrow, and we would have seen a whole lot of written narratives around, no, we're going in this direction, we're doing this, we're investing that. Look, we've been here last year. We were here the year before. I'm probably going to be one of the most unpopular people in New Zealand today. But you know what? 3 of those number in that data are my family. They're my cousins and my nephews. Now, imagine the pain of people like me sitting and watching glib statements and people promising us that things are going to change when we still see our kids dying from preventable situations, and yet somehow I'm the bad guy. I'll take the bad guy if it means that not one more of my whānau is going to take their life, Lisa. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry, Matthew. I'm so sorry to hear that. And we appreciate you coming on this evening to talk to us about this issue, which clearly is so close and dear to your heart. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And that is Matthew Tukaki joining us there from our Wellington studio. He is the man that broke the embargo today on those suicide rates and published them ahead of the ministry's announcement. Grey Power is branding the National Party's promise to raise the pension age to 67 if elected into government as ridiculous. It's something that former Prime Minister and National leader John Key vowed never to do under his leadership, but was swiftly picked up by his successor, Bill English, in 2017. Despite a failed election campaign, the policy has survived National's latest proposals ahead of the 2020 election. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever with the details.
At an event in Auckland today, the National Party leader, Simon Bridges, decided to clutch onto the political hot potato of raising the superannuation age.
The truth is the current government's been very timid. As we've seen on so many things, they talk a big game in opposition. In government, they do nothing. We think this is conservative, cautious, responsible and sustainable.
Simon Bridges says under the proposal, the age wouldn't go up until 2037.
It's not fair if you're 55 today and you've been counting on retiring at 65 to just bring that in a short duration. We're giving a lot of time, and I think the reality is for people of my age, 42, but younger, there isn't necessarily an expectation that it will be the same.
But Grey Power President Mac Welsh says the party better be prepared to get burnt.
It's a ridiculous idea, and I think it will go against them very badly in the polls. I'm really disappointed that the National Party hasn't at least consulted with Grey Power before they made that decision, because we normally have, I would think, a fairly good relationship with the National Party. John Key's firm commitment, it would be over his dead body that the pension age increased.
Mac Welsh says those who have worked in trades will be heavily affected, as many find they can't work into their 60s.
To go and find alternative jobs which are usually lowly paid, and that many of those people who've been tradesmen and been well respected, earned a good wage all their life, find demeaning.
He says the National Party would be better off focusing on KiwiSaver, which he suspects will play a much bigger role than superannuation in the distant future. The Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, says the government has no intention of raising the age of superannuation.
All New Zealanders deserve dignity in retirement, and National really is essentially saying to a lot of New Zealanders that they'll have to wait for that. There's a lot of different circumstances that people have as they come towards the end of their working life, and our view is that this is something New Zealanders have become used to. It's part of the contributions we make over our lifetime, and so we're sticking with 65.
However, Grant Robertson was on board with National's policy to double the amount of time people need to reside in New Zealand to 20 years to qualify for super.
Well, that actually is something that I think most parties in Parliament actually agree with. The 10-year time was seen to be too short. It is about the contribution that you make and then the fact that you get a return on that. So I actually think they're probably just catching up with the other parties in Parliament on that.
National also wants to slash red tape by getting rid of 100 outdated regulations in their first 6 months of government. in what they're calling a regulations bonfire, and repeal the ban on Labour's regional fuel tax. However, only time will tell if they'll get the votes to actually make those policies a reality. From Parliament, for Checkpoint, Ko Charlie Drever, tēnei.
And we'd like to get your feedback on the retirement age. Should it be raised to 67? Now, here's what some people on the streets of Auckland CBD had to say this afternoon.
I think over time it probably has to happen. I think it's a reality of superannuation hole that's probably been being built up over the years.
You'd be keen to work till 67, whether it affects you or not?
Not personally, but I can understand people who are. And so I think it probably makes sense longer term.
I think actually the way things are going at the moment, people are naturally working longer in their lives. They're staying healthier longer. So I suppose, that's going to fit in with that. And I think it's a good thing.
Would you work till 67?
I'm planning to, yes. I think I'm going to be working till probably about 70.
Well, I think it has to come sooner or later. It's growing elderly population, so we need to do something. So I think it is pretty acceptable, yeah.
You'd be pretty keen to work through to 67?
Well, I may not have to. Looking at the cut-off, I think it's at 2037 or something.
37,
yeah, so I may not have to. It won't be my problem.
A lot of people out there that bodies are falling apart by then, and so you want to stop. So it's not always, for the office people it's all right, I suppose, but...
Kind of hard to know now, I mean, since we're so young, but I don't think it'll make a huge difference. It's just 2 more years, right?
I just know my dad's over 65 and he's still working, and I mean, I guess superannuation definitely helps, but I mean, as people are getting older now, more older people are still in their jobs, so I guess there could be a good culture change really if it did go up, so...
Depends on the type of work, I suppose, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
And it's 26 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on that issue. Should we raise the superannuation age to 67? You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. I'm also very keen to hear from you about our suicide rates. New figures released today show that they are still trending upwards, and the figures are particularly bad for Māori. You would have heard maybe Matthew Tukaki from the New Zealand Māori Council speaking to me just before. He broke the embargo and released those figures because he felt they were going to be spun by the government and various other organisations. Just to let you know, if you need to talk to someone about any of the issues raised in that conversation, 1737, you can text or call, and there'll be someone who can speak to you, a counsellor there. But do get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. More than a month after their audacious Netball World Cup triumph, the Silver Ferns finally got to share their success with the New Zealand public. The team were welcomed with a reception at Parliament, where plaudits came from as high as the Prime Minister right down to aspiring young netballers. Bridget Tunnicliffe and videographer Claire Easton-Farrelly were there.
Around 500 people came out to acknowledge the Silver Ferns' incredible World Cup victory. The crowd was mostly made up of young primary and secondary school students eager to mingle with some of their heroes. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, welcomed the Silver Ferns on the steps of Parliament and acknowledged how far they had come.
We were not going to let you away with just sneaking back into Aotearoa and not having a moment where we can say that you're incredible, that your performance was incredible, but much more than that. You've been on a journey that has had highs and lows, and you came out on top.
The Minister of Sport, Grant Robertson, met the Silver Ferns early on in their campaign in Liverpool and says when he left, he had a feeling they would go all the way.
I was in Liverpool and I got on the train to go back to London, and a man sat down beside me and he said, "What are you here for?" And I said, "I'm here supporting the Silver Ferns netball team." And he said, "Oh, how are they going to go?" And I said, "They're going to win."
The mastermind coach behind the victory, Noeline Taurua, told the crowd the win was bigger than the Silver Ferns.
At the end, and we were up with the Prime Minister, and she did speak to us about parity. She did speak to us about women in sport, to what we can do for the greater good. Hopefully that we can provide a pathway for not only young girls but also boys to want to play netball, to play sport in the community.
The Silver Ferns then performed a waiata before they headed out to the fans. Kei Casey Korpua, who played her last game of netball in the final, says she still hasn't watched a full replay of the game.
No, I've watched the highlights and I got so nervous and so like a hot flush almost, and my husband was like, you know you win this. I'm like, I know, but still for the first time watching it, God, I looked dead on my feet, to be honest.
Korpua, who came out of retirement for the World Cup, admits she had to endure quite a lot of physical pain to get through the tournament.
It was extreme, but Knowles had put us through our paces before that, so we knew we could get through it. And the couple of weeks leading up to that, I don't think I've had anything harder. After that England semi-final, Meals and I were roommates, and we just sort of flopped onto our beds and were like, how do we do this again tomorrow? Because we were absolutely shattered. But the sun came up and you had to get up and go again.
Students from nearby Wellington Girls College say it is great to have role models they can look up to.
Having Maria as my inspiration, yeah, she's really good. So.
And what did you talk to them about? What did you ask them?
Well, we kind of just asked for a photo. We
got
photos.
Some pretty cool photos. Maybe show some family, friends.
Yeah, definitely shows my mum.
Teacher.
Yeah.
It was the first time most members of the team have been back together again after the World Cup, as many had different commitments straight after. Nolene Tauro went back to the Sunshine Coast to resume her quest for a third straight title with the Lightning in the Australian Super Netball competition. The Silver Fern shooter Emilianne Ignazio, who became an international star at Liverpool, says they wouldn't have achieved what they did without Taurua.
Honestly, I don't think we would. I don't think she would. She's done some pretty amazing stuff with our group, and we all know it and we feel it. She's a really, really strong leader for us. So I don't know where we'd be without her.
Taurua confirmed last week she's leaving the Australian League and will stay on as Silver Fern's coach for the next 2 campaigns. But beyond that, she's still not sure.
I've been coaching for a very long time, and sometimes I think, is there anything else that I can actually do? I love the challenge of what the Silver Ferns did bring, and knowing we only had 11 months to be able to build it, and I love that and the learning that went behind it. So I suppose got to be able to find the passion and whether I fit within what needs to happen moving forward.
Taurua says she's heartened that the result has helped boost the profile of netball in New Zealand.
For us to heighten the netball profile, plus also I think raise the overall general spirits of the youngsters and know that it's a clear pathway for a lot of people if they want to, netball to be a career, and it's a great choice. So the spirits have been definitely raised, and it's great that we have been able to influence that.
Students from Sacred Heart Primary School were impressed with the cup, which they got to see up close, and it seems the Silver Ferns have left a lasting impression. What have the Silver Ferns taught you, do you think?
That we can be anything that we want to be, and that when we grow up we can, if we work hard, we can become anything.
Not to give up, even if we're behind. Don't give up.
There will be plenty of anticipation for the Silver Ferns' next series, the Constellation Cup against Australia, which starts October 13 in Christchurch. For Checkpoint Court, Bridget Tunnicliffe, TNA.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, the Māori Council says the latest suicide statistics released today are a rolling train wreck. Health Minister David Clarke joins us live. A woman who left Gloria Vale with her 7 children speaks about fleeing under the cover of darkness. And Brazilian warplanes dump water on the burning forest in the Amazon. We'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program today. Do get in touch. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Susanna's here now with the headlines.
New figures show Maori suicide rates have reached a record high and are being described as a national disgrace. In the year to June 2018, 169 people with Maori whakapapa have died to suicide, an almost 20% increase from the year before. The rate has increased every year since 2013, a trend the Māori Council is describing as a tragedy and a complete failure. Māori Council Executive Director Matt Tukaki says the Māori suicide rate is now the highest per head of population in the Western world. Grey Power is describing the National Party's promise to raise the pension age to 67 if elected as ridiculous. The party today said it would go ahead with raising the super age by 2037 if elected to government next year. Grey Power's President Mac Welsh says the party better be prepared for a backlash. The government will next week lay out its reset plan for its failed KiwiBuild program. The former Housing Minister Phil Twyford promised 1,000 KiwiBuild homes would be completed by July, then 5,000 by next year, then 12,000 a year each year until 2029. New Housing Minister Megan Woods will announce the details of the reset next Wednesday. A boil water notice in the Marlborough town of Seddon has been lifted after being in place for 20 years. This morning, Nelson Marlborough Health agreed to lift the notice following the completion of a series of checks. Marlborough District Council Chief Executive Mark Wheeler says it is a monumental milestone for the people of Seddon. A modern water treatment plant opened in March this year, but the boil notice remained in place until today. And in cricket, New Zealand has declared at 431 for 6 early on the last day of the second and final cricket test against Sri Lanka in Colombo, giving the tourists 187-run first innings lead. That's the headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update will be at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The Maori Council has described the latest suicide statistics as a rolling train wreck. The figures were released officially late this afternoon after the council broke the Chief Coroner's embargo originally scheduled for tomorrow. It showed there were 685 suicides in the year to June 30, 17 more than last year. Maori suicides, which were already disproportionately high, well, they've jumped further, with 169 Maori people dying by suicide in the year to June 30, up 27 from 142 deaths last year. Executive Director of the Maori Council, Matthew Tukake, told us earlier that this is a national tragedy and there is no national strategy. He asked where the plan is. Joining us now is Health Minister David Clarke. Good evening, Mr Clarke. Where is the plan?
Good evening, Lisa. I just want to acknowledge at the outset those families and whānau who have lost loved ones. The statistics that are released today show the fifth year in a row that the rate has risen. But, of course, behind the statistics are the families, the brothers, the sisters, the mothers, the fathers, the grandfathers and grandmothers. And one death by suicide is certainly one death too many. And that's why we make no apology for tackling this long-term challenge we've inherited and have made the biggest investment in mental health ever made in the budget. We are taking mental health seriously.
So what specifically have you done in the last year that has lowered the suicide rate?
Well, Lisa, no one's pretending that there is a quick fix here. We all have a role to play. Government does have a role to play in providing leadership, but of course it depends upon each of us as individuals getting alongside people we know who are at risk. We have made some investments, some really substantial investments in the budget that's just gone, $1.9 billion into mental health, including money for a new frontline service that is aimed to make sure people are supported early rather than late, 40 million towards suicide prevention, including bereavement counselling.
And I do understand that,
families.
Minister, and I understand those figures because we have heard them before. Obviously, Matthew Tukake raises the point that he would like a commission, a mental health commission. He would like 2 commissioners, one specifically for Māori, and he would like a zero-tolerance approach to suicide in the hospital and treatment system. Is he going to get those things?
Well, we do have a suicide prevention strategy being finalised. Obviously, there hasn't been one in place since 2016, and one of the firm recommendations from the inquiry into mental health and addiction, Heara Oranga, was to get that prevention strategy in place. So
how far off is that, do you think?
Coming weeks, Lisa. It is quite close now.
2 weeks, 3 weeks?
We also expect to make announcements on the Suicide Prevention Office as well in the next few weeks.
Māori Commissioner for Mental Health?
Look, I won't get ahead of the announcements we're going to make, but all of the parties in the coalition have committed to having a mental health commission. It is important that we have an independent watchdog that looks at the whole system and makes sure everybody is responding appropriately. This is a national tragedy. Obviously, it hasn't happened overnight. Those rates have been ticking up over a number of years.
Can you understand?
It is the reason why we're responding in the way that we're responding and taking this long-term challenge seriously.
I don't know if you had the opportunity to hear Matthew Tukake, but he was, well, It's three of his relatives are among the statistics that we are discussing today, and he has said that he will not stand by while another one of his people dies. Can you understand why he is so upset with the direction things are headed in, and what can you say that will give him any hope that next year is going to be different?
Well, I think all of us are upset. I don't know any New Zealanders who haven't been touched in some way in their wider family or friend network, certainly most immediately by mental health issues, but also by suicide. We have a shameful suicide rate in New Zealand, and all of us want to make that different. Having a strategy in place that guides people is really important. I accept that finding in Heiara Oranga. Having a suicide prevention office in place is important. Having a mental health commission in place is important. All of those bits of work are at advanced stages, and they have been lacking for a very long time. It is something that we accept that long-term challenge has to be tackled. It's not something that can be put off.
So, Minister, can you be more specific with the time frame? Because that is the other issue for some people. Things are moving too slowly.
Weeks, not months. Weeks, not months.
A fortnight?
Weeks, not months.
And are you ruling out a Māori mental health commissioner or not? Are you leaving the door open to that?
Look, I'm not going to get ahead of those announcements, Lisa. The news today shows us that trend is still going in the wrong direction.
Particularly for Māori.
A challenge that needs to be tackled, and particularly for Māori. So we've had specific Māori input across all of our mental health work. It is an area of particular focus because we recognise that the rate there is unacceptable, as is the rate across the board.
Okay, so while we're talking about strategies and timeframes, when can we expect the cancer plan to be revealed?
The Cancer Action Plan will be revealed not very far away at all.
What does that mean, Minister? Not very far away.
Look, we've said we want to have it at the end of this month, Lisa, which is not very far away at all. So it's within about a week.
So you expect to announce this within a week. Will there be a cancer agency, a separate entity?
Again, Lisa, I'm not going to get ahead of announcements. We're focused, though, on making sure we have strong central leadership for cancer care, and because the standard across New Zealand hasn't been equal.
Strong central leadership isn't necessarily a standalone agency, though, is it, Minister? So are you committing to a standalone agency, or is it going to be something within the ministry?
As I said, Lisa, I'm not going to make announcements today, but what I am committing to is tackling the long-term challenge that we've inherited around cancer, where there has been unequal provision across the country. We don't think that's fair or right, and we're investing not just for the next few years, but for the longer term to make sure that we actually improve the standard of cancer care across New Zealand so that everybody can access high-quality cancer care, no matter who they are and no matter where they live.
Really appreciate your time this evening. Thank you for joining us. That is the Health Minister, David Clarke. As you heard there, he indicated that we can expect to see a strategy around suicide within a number of weeks, not months. And he also indicated that we can expect to see, the National Cancer Plan within the next week. Let us know your thoughts on those things. 2101 on the text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ and email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's get to the business news now. Nona Peltier has been waiting patiently. Nona, what are we talking about today? Enlighten me.
We're going to talk a little bit about Meridian Energy.
Yeah.
They reported their full year result, and it was quite strong. It was up, looks like it was up about 2/3 to 339 million. That's a very big number, and it was on very strong revenue. However, the chief executive of Meridian says don't expect the same again, because they had really an extraordinary year where the wholesale market was such that they were able to cash in on that because there was a shortage in the gas supply, so that helped them out. As well, their wind generation in Australia really exceeded their expectations. expectations. And what was the other thing? Yeah, well, overall, they also won a whole lot more customers. So,
did they?
Yes, they did. They gained 11,000 customers. That's a 4% increase, which is pretty hefty.
Do they know where they came from? That's curious, isn't it?
Well, they just really a lot of competition in the retail sector, and so Meridian has been quite aggressive in winning customers there, and it's paid off for them. So overall, a good result. And however, the markets are a little bit weak, and so even though it was a good result, the fact that they are saying it's not going to be as good next year or this current year saw their share price drop 2%. That was 10 cents down to $4.67.
And you mentioned the markets. It's been a bit of rock and roll on the markets. So
It
trade
certainly
wars,
has.
China and America. What's going on?
All of that. Well, there's been a flight to out of stocks into safer assets. So gold is one. Oil is also down because people...
Gold, it seems so old school.
Gold, yes, gold. And gold is doing quite well. We saw quite a good gain there. But overall, the markets are down today. Our market ended down, 1.1%. So but it was not so bad. I mean, some markets are far worse off. We took a lead from the United States market, which closed on Friday. Luckily, we had a weekend to digest some of the trade war escalation that came through. So in the end, we were better off than, say, the U.S. markets, which were down 2.5%, 3% for the tech-laden NASDAQ. 1.3% is not so bad, 139 points down. Australia at the same time was down 1.5%, Hong Kong 2.75%, and the Nikkei, which is the Japan index there, was down 2%. So overall, Asia... What's going to happen in the future is anybody's guess, because we don't know what is in Donald Trump's mind, and he's really...
we don't know.
No, we don't know what's in his mind. So we're not sure exactly what's going to happen, but clearly the market on Friday was already nosedived following some concerns that the United States president had ordered companies to look for other locations to operate their business outside of China. That was definitely not something that was calming for the market, you can be sure. And then after the market closed, he announced an additional 5% tariffs on $550 billion US worth of goods. So we don't know whether or not that's been priced into the market, whether or not the market's going to ignore it, because since then, the G7 meeting, was Donald Trump really serious about this? We don't really know. He changes his mind often. So we'll have to see what happens next.
Master of understatement. Yes.
That's right. But our currency is holding firm at 63.7 US cents, 94.7 Australian, and 52 pence.
52 pence, okay.
Not bad, because there's a lot out there to
contend with. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we'll find out exactly what happens tomorrow, right?
Yeah. Watch this space. Nona will be back tomorrow. That's Nona Peltier with our business news. It's about 14 minutes away from 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. As always, we're keen to hear from you about anything you've heard on the program today, particularly around the suicide rates that were released today, showing that they are still rising and were particularly bad for Maori. Also, the superannuation. Should you get paid, have to wait until you're 67? What do you make of that? You can get in touch, text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Te Ao Māori is in mourning today for one of its unsung heroes. The Ngāti Hine elder, Peter Pirani, died early this morning in Auckland Hospital. The 73-year-old served for many years as a public servant and New Zealand first politician. But as our Northland reporter Lois Williams reports, he will also be remembered as the man who saved Waitangi.
Peter Paraone, who helped organise this year's festivities, joins us now from the treaty grounds. Kia ora, good morning.
Kia ora. Kia ora from Waitangi.
The familiar voice of Peter Pirani, called on after every Waitangi Day for years to explain to listeners what went wrong and what went right. As chair of the Waitangi National Trust and organiser of the official program, he was perennially frustrated by what he called the shenanigans at Te Tii Marae, but he was eternally optimistic that all could be resolved. 2 years ago, Mr Pirani lost patience and took charge, transforming the dreaded Crown Pōwhiri from chaos to spectacular pageant. New Zealand First's Shane Jones explains.
I recall him inviting Kingi Taurua to a hapu meeting and informing Kingi Taurua that in future there would be no more fireworks down at the lower Waitangi marae. Events were going to be moved to the top marae so that the dignity and the mana associated with Waitangi was restored. Not an easy thing to do, say, indeed to execute, but through his role at Waitangi and obviously his own lineage in Ngāti Hine, he was able to deliver on that outcome.
At the time, Mr Pirani said protests had been legitimate at Waitangi since 1840, but he was no longer prepared to have ngapuhi held up to ridicule.
The ceremonies are one of welcome, and then some of the protests that's occurred certainly isn't in keeping with what one would expect from a civilised nation.
Peter Pirani was a direct descendant of the great Ngāti Hine fighting chief turned peacemaker Kawiti, but he also honoured his Pākehā forebears and celebrated the bicultural ideal, and he walked and talked easily in both worlds. He entered politics in 2002 as a New Zealand First List MP, and he served 3 terms, losing his seat at the last election. But well before that, he'd had leading roles in Maori affairs, Te Puni Kōkiri, the Maori Trustee, and the Maori Language Commission, Te Tautawhiri, and more recently as chair of the Local Government Commission. He was made a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit in 1997 for his services to Maori and the community. And his death has drawn tributes from MPs on all sides of the House, including the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern.
And of course I've had a bit to do with him as well. He was involved with the Waitangi commemorations and the Waitangi National Trust, and I found him to be thoughtful, considered, a kind man, and I know he'll be a real loss to the North in particular.
Peter Pirani's cousin, Peter Tipene, says the Ngāti Hine elder was a quiet, courteous achiever who never liked to fuss, and his death has come as a shock to many who didn't know he was unwell.
Like the person that he is, he said, please don't share this with anyone. Peter, I'm going into hospital, I'm going in for heart surgery, it's quite serious. And please don't share anything with anyone. I want to really keep this low key, so I didn't. But it's slowly been coming out over the last 3 weeks that he was in a bad way.
Peter Pirani's whānau expect to take him back from Auckland to his home marae of Motatau in the Bay of Islands tomorrow.
E kara e pita ko rewa te waka. Tēnei mātou te uta i a koe ki rungi te waka. Te hoki ai koe ki o tūpuna ki o mātua. E moi o te atue.
And that is Shane Jones ending that story from Lois Williams. A family of 9 that fled Gloria Vale says the Christian community tried to separate their family to stop them from leaving. Mr and Mrs Bencannon, who only want to be known by their last names, were born and raised in the community for almost 37 years. Mr Bencannon was thrown out of the community 2 months ago, and his wife and 7 children joined him later. For the first time, Mrs Bencannon has opened up about the harrowing ordeal. She spoke exclusively to our Christchurch reporter Nicholas Poynton.
It has been 5 weeks since Mrs Bencannon walked away from the only life she knew. Her husband was excommunicated from the community 4 weeks earlier. Gloria Vale leaders discovered he was operating a private bank and trade me account and gave him no choice but to leave. No one is above the collective. After her husband was sent away, Mrs Bencannon came under tremendous pressure.
There is a decided path that you're supposed to choose if your husband is sent away. You're to decide that you don't see him again and that's the end of your marriage and you live alone for the rest of your life.
Being apart from her husband was the hardest thing she has ever had to do. When he came to visit her and their 7 children, she was manipulated and told that seeing him was against the word of God.
In the 4.5 weeks that I was separated from it was very, very traumatic. He came to visit one Saturday and I was told that I wasn't allowed to see him or I'd be breaking my commitment, I'd be breaking the word of God. But then they turned around and said, well, we can't tell you what to do, you have to decide this for yourself. And I said, but you've just told me that you don't want me to, and you've just told me that you know what you're telling me is breaking the law, but you are putting pressure on me to go your way and say it's my own choice that I'm deciding not to see my husband, but it's your choice. You're trying to push your choice onto me. I do want to see him. So they'd have another conversation around again. Well, you can go and see him, and it's your choice, and we can't stop you because it's against the law. But if you do, you are not to be allowed to live here anymore, and you can't come back. And as far as I understood then, that meant damnation. That meant I'd lost my soul and I was going to hell. And that wasn't something that I wanted to choose.
Mrs. Binkanen spoke of the physical pain she felt.
When that person is taken away from you, that person that you love so much, and that it's actually a physical pain, you feel physically ripped from your heart. You feel like you're bleeding out your heart. And the other wives who are still suffering that now, we had talks because they had that same physical pain. It's not only mental, emotional stress, it's actually a physical pain that people can't understand. Unless it happens to you, you can't understand. I had compassion and empathy for the other women whose husbands had been sent away. But I really didn't know what they were feeling until it happened to me myself.
The separation of family members who are defecting from the status quo in Gloriavale is a strategy used to alienate those who have been kicked out. Former Gloriavale member Tim Hartnell left the commune 34 years ago. He stressed there were good people in Gloriavale, but says splitting families is a tactic to stop a whole family from leaving.
It's a strategy that they've used for many, many years, and I believe the separating of families is wrong.
At first, the technique did not work. Mrs. Binkanen could not bear to be away from her husband any longer. She decided to leave with him and her 7 children. However, the pull and the control Gloriavale had over her life was too great. She returned to the West Coast community within 24 hours with 4 of her children.
I was terrified. I was completely convinced that I was going to hell. And then I had to be on the property at Gloriavale to be saved.
But her return was met with consequences. She was stripped of all previous responsibilities and was no longer allowed to work as a teacher.
It was their way of saying, you've been put down. You are in rejection. We are rejecting you because of what you have done. You have created a precedent and you don't do this. If your husband's sent away, you stay here.
Soon, though, Mrs. Binkanen could not bear it anymore. The wives of other men who had been kicked out were living reflections of the person she did not want to become.
That's what I'm going to end up, a crippled person who doesn't even know my own mind, because they're so twisted in what they say. They twist what you say, they twist so many things that you don't really know what's on the level anymore. I just thought, I'm next. That is what I'm going to end up like if I stay here. And I thought, no, I want to be alive. I want to be fully alive. I'm alive and I'm going to be alive. I'm going to dare to live. And so I rang up and I told him to come pick me up.
So a plan was set. Mr. Binkanen would arrive at Gloriavale at 8 p.m. on a Friday night in early July. They were careful to make sure it was an evening where everybody would be at a compulsory film in the commune's hall. Regardless, Mrs. Binkanen's heart was racing. She'd packed their bags, got the children ready, and had tried to pin her door shut. Then she heard a knock at the window.
Coincidentally, it was the exact same 14th years of the anniversary my husband had asked me to marry him. And so when he knocked on the window and opened the window, he said, "Will you marry me?" And it was so beautiful.
The family has been united and have been living together in Rolleston for the past 4 weeks. Like her husband, Mrs. Binkanen has no desire to go back to Gloriavale. Her priority now is finding a suitable home in Rolleston and finding a job for her husband. Gloriavale declined to comment on these allegations and the circumstances surrounding the Binkanen's departure. For Checkpoint, Nicholas Poynton.
And we've had an overwhelming amount of feedback from you on 2 topics, on the suicide statistics released today and also super. Let's start with the interview we did earlier in the program with Matthew Tukake from the New Zealand Maori Council. He has had enough of what he describes as inaction and the train wreck that these statistics are. The figures show that once again there was an increase in the suicide rate. Michael has got in touch to say, "Kia ora, Lisa. Matthew is right. We need a plan to address suicide. That plan must must involve reduced access to drugs like marijuana and P by young people, as there is a phenomenally high correlation between youth suicide and the use of psychosis-inducing drugs like these two, and an almost certain causal link as well. Ngā mihi, says Michael. Someone else got in touch to say, not sure this bloke's name, but Matthew, about suicide. He is absolutely right. Millions go into mental health in the north, yet others of us who are unfunded for whānau coping with the terrible consequences of suicide. I work in the field. Penny has been in touch to say, totally agree with your speaker. Suicide is exacerbated by everyday struggles. No houses, no money for food at the core. Why not lift the benefits now when present benefits are completely inadequate for survival, says Penny. Every day we delay, we create another generation of deprivation and suicides. And this person, no name, who says, I have fallen in love with Matthew during this interview. Absolute passion and love. Another one here. Neither government is prepared to tackle mental health as they are both afraid of the answers. Labor is now in a position to make a plan as they have just engaged in an intensive mental health inquiry. Walk the streets of any city in New Zealand and mental health is staring you in the face, and the lack of facilities. These people have nowhere to go. Their families are vulnerable. They are vulnerable, and still no plan. Stop depressing us about the road safety and spend the money on suicide prevention. Rachel, who's a mental health nurse, says, we have seen none of the resources. Put it where the rubber hits the road, says Rachel. More staff for crisis teams and community support. Thank you so much for your feedback. Hopefully we'll have more after 6.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. The Prime Minister says she still opposes a suicide reduction target despite an increase in people dying by suicide in the past year. The Chief Coroner, Judge Deborah Marshall, has released the annual provisional suicide statistics. They show in the year to June, 685 people died by suicide, 17 more than the year prior. They also show the number of teenagers dying between the ages of 15 to 19 increased from 53 last year to 73. Ms Ardern says there's no question that the suicide rate is too high. However, she says there's no evidence that a reduction target would be effective.
And I was concerned, and so was Cabinet, that a target implies that we have a tolerance for suicide, and we do not. And so that is why we made the decision that we will continue to focus as a government, as a country, on bringing that rate down. But for us, of course, the goal has to be no one lost to suicide.
Jacinda Ardern. And the Prime Minister is sticking to her pledge to never raise the superannuation age, which while she leads the government. The National Party says it will raise the pension age to 67 from 2037 if elected to government. Nationals leader Simon Bridges says that will ensure the sustainability of the superannuation scheme. But Jacinda Ardern says that policy is off the table under her leadership. A jury has heard Sir Peter Jackson didn't know one of his vintage planes had been sold until he saw a picture of it in someone else's hangar. Eugene DeMarco is on trial in the High Court in Wellington, accused of fraud during 2016 and 2017 while working for Sir Peter's company, the Vintage Aviator. Crown lawyer Sally Carter says Mr DeMarco arranged with the New Zealand Warbirds Association for money for 2 planes he was selling on behalf of the Vintage Aviator to be transferred to his company in July 2016. But it's alleged he didn't tell the Vintage Aviator the sale had gone through, using the nearly $2 million himself. Ms Carter told the jury Sir Peter saw a photo of his plane on Facebook in 2017.
Which showed the BE-2 in the Wahlberg's hangar back in November 2016. And that was the first that he became aware that their plane was no longer where it should be and was with Wahlberg's.
Crown lawyer Sally Carter. Bolivian President Evo Morales says he is now open to international aid to fight the blazes that have engulfed rural villages and doubled in size since last week. The blazes have burned unabated across vast swathes of hilly tropical forest near Bolivia's border with Paraguay and Brazil. At least 1 million hectares, or approximately 10,000 square kilometres, have been scorched by the fires. President Morales says he now accepts he needs international help to get on top of the problem.
Nadie está prohibiendo la cooperación voluntaria.
Nobody is banning voluntary, spontaneous cooperation to those who want to help. I've instructed the Ministry of Defence and the Ministry of Foreign Relations to see how they can be of help to put out these fires that continue to appear in the area of Robore and Chiquitania.
It's thought that the fires were started deliberately to clear the land for farming, but quickly got out of control. A family of 9 that fled Gloriavale says the Christian community tried to separate their family to control them. Mr. and Mrs. Ben Canaan, who only want to be known by their last names, lived in the community for almost 37 years. Mr. Ben Canaan was thrown out of the community 2 months ago, and his wife and 7 children later joined him. Mrs. Ben Canaan told Checkpoint pressure was put on her to distance herself from her husband.
There is a decided path that you're supposed to choose. If your husband is sent away, you're to decide that you don't see him again and that's the end of your marriage and you live alone for the rest of your life.
Former Gloriavale member Mrs. Ben Canaan, she says the splitting up of her family was intended to prevent her and her children from leaving. Greenpeace says New Zealand's vote against giving new international protections to mako sharks is difficult to understand. Wildlife experts at the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species in Switzerland voted to strengthen the protection of mako sharks, but 40 countries, including New Zealand, voted against it. The government says it voted against the proposal because there's not enough evidence to show mako sharks are disappearing as a result of fishing. Greenpeace New Zealand Executive Director Russell Norman says every protection should be given to sharks.
The New Zealand position is very difficult to understand why New Zealand would oppose something like this, which protects species that are highly at risk. Shark numbers have plummeted globally as a result of the commercial fishing industry.
Russell Norman. It's 5 minutes past 6. The Black Caps have snared 2 early wickets as they try and snatch victory in the second and final cricket test against Sri Lanka in Colombo. New Zealand declared at 431 for 6 early on in the last day, giving the tourists a 187-run first innings lead, with BJ Watling scoring his 7th test century, finishing 105 not out. A short time ago, Sri Lanka had slumped to 6 for 2 with Ajaz Patel snaring a run and Trent Boult a wicket. Sri Lanka lead the series 1-0. The new All Whites coach, Danny Hay, says he wants his players to break free of the defensive shackles which have held New Zealand back as an international side. Hay was today appointed as coach of the national men's team, replacing Fritz Schmidt of Switzerland, who left the role abruptly in June. Schmidt quit the post after just 16 months in charge, partly through frustration at the lack of matches for the national team. The 44-year-old Hay says he doesn't see the job as a stepping stone to higher profile roles internationally and is adamant.
I want us to be let off the shackles, let some of our creative players really show what they're capable of. I think we can have far more attacking intent than we've probably previously seen in recent times with the All Whites, allowing our players up in the front third to really let loose and try and hurt some opposition sides.
Danny Hay. Golfer Rory McIlroy has won the Tour Championship and the FedEx Cup in style in Atlanta, collecting the biggest first prize in the sport, $23.5 million. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, comedian Corey Gonzalez-McCure is eating fried chicken in the shower of James Nukise. Dana Johansson sums up the weekend sport. We have a window on the world of TV talent shows in Afghanistan. And Otago University paleopathologist Sean Halcrow on the plain of jars in Laos. What is it? What's it got to do with Otago University? And what is a paleopathologist anyway? On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Showers becoming isolated towards the evening, clearing by tomorrow afternoon. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine tonight, showers spreading north tomorrow. Waikato to Taranaki, including Taumaranui and Taupo, isolated showers, fine spells increasing tomorrow. Whanganui to Kapiti, including Taihape, Wairarapa and Nelson. Occasional showers, clearing Nelson this evening and elsewhere by tomorrow afternoon. Then mainly fine weather. Wellington, Marlborough and Canterbury, showers clearing from the south this evening or overnight, then fine. Bulla to Fiordland, also Stewart Island, isolated showers more widespread in Fiordland tomorrow. Otago and Southland, showers retreating to the coast tonight, becoming fine tomorrow morning. And Chatham Islands, showers at times a few possibly heavy tonight. You're with RNZ National. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Suicide rates have risen yet again, with 685 people dying by suicide in the past year. That's 17 more lives lost. Arthur Harawira lost his son to suicide when he was just 15 years old, and though it was more than 20 years ago, he says the pain never goes away. Arthur is part of a biker group called RATS, Riders Against Teen Suicide, and he joins me now. Kia ora, Arthur.
Kia ora.
What do you, and there are no easy answers here, but what do we need to be doing more of, do you think?
Thank you for the time and for the effort of putting it on news and for all the discussions going around the country. It's a huge issue, one that we ain't going to deal with and fix tonight. You know, there's no simple answers to this, but us talking about it is a step towards that, you know, and I think that given the opportunity, we as New Zealanders have a great passion for finding solutions and finding ways out of a deep hole. And you know what? I think we're in a deep hole at the moment, especially with the increase in the suicide numbers. It's gone up, hasn't it?
It has, and it's particularly bad for Maori. I understand you would like Maori to be able to play a greater role in protecting young Maori. How would you see that working?
Well, we've seen it in our group RATS. Everywhere that we go and we discuss the issue of suicide amongst our Maori community, we get huge support and huge response about suicide, especially from the youth, what their problems are, the difficulties that they have with trying to translate that into a language that they could speak with adults about. You know, that's a huge problem. Trying to grapple with emotions, especially teen emotions, and to articulate them to adults in a way that they can engender some sort of support and help for, you know, in their battle to get a better life, you know.
Arthur, what are young Māori telling you about the things that are worrying them?
Oh, look, I live in a Maori community in Kaikohe, and we have huge problems there. It's a majority Maori community. A lot of the Maori families support each other. There's really good support in the Maori community for each other. But I don't think that there's organisational support that could translate into a workable solution for youth, you know. We've got youth clubs, a youth after-school programs, you know, and things like that, which is really good. But when it comes down to getting jobs, sorting issues out with your girlfriend or your boyfriend, or if they've got interest in somebody else, and dealing with all of those, where do we go for that? And so the problems for Māori is that we can recognise what the problems are, but we don't have organisational support or opportunities to go in there and roll out a solution for them, you know.
So what do you need from other people, from the government or whoever? What do you need?
I think I think what's needed is that Māori communities need to have a decision-making place in society in regards to suicide. What are the contributing factors to suicide in our own communities, in our Māori communities? Now, unemployment, housing, job creations, all that, general poverty over Māori. You know, that we don't have a solution for that. You know, there isn't a one-stop shop for solution for all of that sort of stuff. And so Māori communities are left dangling on the outside, trying to invent ways to help ourselves out of something that we I don't think that we intentionally created, like the unemployment situation and that sort of stuff. It's not really in our power to create those types of situations in our communities, but that's what it is in Northland. Unemployment is through the roof. School attendance is terrible. You know, we could there's all types of things. Homework classes, that sort of stuff, after school activities, sports and that sort of stuff. We've got some up north in Kaikohe. We've got some sports clubs and that sort of stuff. Good.
Arthur, the statistics show us that the suicide rate for Māori is more than twice the rate it is for Pākehā. I want to ask you, if that was reversed, if the Pākehā rate of suicide was twice that of Māori, do you think the approach to solving the problem and the emphasis given to solving the problem would be different?
I can tell you it would be entirely different. There'd be solutions coming out of the woodwork. If there were more Pākehā dying than Māori in suicide, you'd have solutions pouring out of the woodwork at it in every community. And it's really sad that it's Māori are twice the number of Pākehā and there's no solutions and nobody wants to say anything. And this is the scary thing, is that at the end of the day, Māori have to invent these types of solutions ourselves, you know, without the support of central and local government, you know, bodies. And I think that there needs to be a greater emphasis for Māori having a role to play in the community in deciding where communities and that sort of stuff goes, you know.
So Māori making decisions for Māori?
Māori being part of the decision-making process, eh? Like RATS, our Riders Against Teenage Suicide, that's not a government-funded body. We're an organisation, a voluntary organisation, mostly based around our motorbikes making a noise about suicide. And the reason why we're making the noise is because no one else is making a noise. You know? That's
Arthur, I really appreciate you joining us this evening. That is Arthur Harawira, who lost his son to suicide when his son was 15 years old. It's more than 20 years ago now. And as you heard him say there, he is still part of a group trying to help young people who are struggling. Let us know your thoughts on that. Text us 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The head of the Ministry of Culture and Heritage looks likely to keep her job despite a security breach exposing hundreds of people's private details to fraudsters. Bernadette Kavanagh yesterday revealed the ministry had uploaded copies of passports, driver's licences and birth certificates to an external website without sufficient protections. Almost 300, mostly young people, have been caught up in the breach. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, is responsible for the ministry and has expressed disappointment in the era. She told her weekly post-cabinet press conference that a review is looking into exactly what went wrong, but she doesn't expect a resignation letter from Ms Kavanagh.
She has apologised. I've, of course, followed closely what steps the ministry has taken since becoming aware of this breach, and I'm confident that they have prioritised the needs of those affected, moving directly to contact all those who had information that was provided to the ministry via this website. They successfully made contact with a large majority and at least passed on information to those they were unable to reach directly. And that was their priority with the individuals affected. Of course, we have expectations and we do need to lift the standards. There is no question here. But for me, I do not expect a resignation. I do expect, though, better results.
Jacinda Ardern says Cabinet has also signed off on an immediate directive to go to a range of ministries and government departments. The agencies, which include the Ministries of Defence, Transport and Housing, will have to immediately review any ICT projects planned or underway. They will also be required to use an approved list of providers for any web or digital services.
My understanding is that list has not been mandatory, but as I've set out, as an interim step while we work through what needs to occur to prevent this ever happening again, we will now be requiring those small agencies to procure from that list. over the near future while we work to ensure the security of all New Zealanders' data and restore confidence in the systems and the agencies who are providing services to the New Zealand public.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern. It is 18 minutes after 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Migrant students left high and dry after their business school went into liquidation say they're disgusted that they've been told to pay more money. Last week, the Kiwi Institute of Training and Education, known as KITE, went into liquidation and requested NZQA to deregister it. Students who paid tens of thousands of dollars and had already completed their studies can't get their accreditation and say they've been scammed. Today they had a meeting with the NZQA and Immigration New Zealand, but they couldn't find out whether they have passed their final assessment. Alex Perrottet and cameraman Nick Monroe went along.
These students were so close to graduating. They'd done all the work and paid all the money. Then their school, KITE, went into liquidation. Karambir Singh and his colleagues are about to head into a crisis meeting with the NZQA and Immigration New Zealand. They want to find out whether they've passed and whether they can just get their diploma.
Some of students, they have visa expiring, and what are the procedure for them, and if they have to pay, why they have to pay money, because it's not our fault. So immigration also and NZQA also help us.
The meeting dragged on with desperate students wondering where they will go next and whether they will get any help. The short answer, no.
It's totally ridiculous and disgusting. We can't do anything. It's supposed like if we have to do a strike or something, why we waste like 6-8 months again? If it's happen again, seriously, it's disgusting. I will go for suicide, I think so. Because I can't sleep because of these disgusting things. I already gave a resign from my job because I'm doing plenty of mistakes here as well.
So it's another day in limbo for these students. Some of them came to KITE on the recommendation of NZQA when their last school was deregistered. And they had to pay again to extend their visa and to enrol in new courses. Today, Immigration New Zealand told them their visas are no longer valid, they must pay for a new visa and have a new offer from another institute, as well as prove they have enough funds to live on while they wait even longer for the accreditation that they say is rightfully theirs. And NZQA told them it can't get any more information from KITE as it has called in the liquidators, which means some students may get their assignments marked and others not. It does commit to refunding students who may have failed and won't be able to resit exams or resubmit assignments. But the students say it's a scam.
I'm here at this college for about 18 months. I was supposed to finish this course in 8 months. So NZQA came the last December and they said you have to repeat the course because the marking was not up to standards. So I did the whole course again and they came again to the end and they said the college is shut down now. So how do you feel about that?
And where are the NZQA and immigration officials? Hurrying out the side door.
Is that right? But these students have been basically right out of pocket. So is there going to be any reimbursement for them at all?
Please speak to our comms teams.
There was no response to our calls and emails to KITE, so we went along to its premises in Auckland to see if we could find anyone. Levels 4 and 5 at 16 Waverley Street were locked off in the lift, so up the fire exit, and the doors locked as well. We met a student who had already graduated but wanted to pick up his diploma, but there's just 2 empty floors and no one around. It's very clear that no one is getting any answers from KITE today. The students are now turning their rage at the NZQA. They say that the NZQA stepped in last December, saying that KITE's assessments were not up to standard, and the students had to pay $750 a paper to sit them again. Now, while the NZQA looks around for yet another school for these students to attend, the only other answer they have today is from Immigration New Zealand, which says they have to pay more than $300 to extend their visas again. NZQA could not provide us with a spokesperson today and requested written questions. We sent those at 11:40 this morning, but by the time we went to air, there was no response. We spoke to a principal of another NZQA registered school who says NZQA is not transparent and makes unnecessary delays. The students say that seems deliberate and they're getting exploited by the system. And Immigration New Zealand, we asked them why they didn't provide any assistance at today's meeting other than to ask the students for more money. They also couldn't provide a spokesperson and said NZQA is the lead agency in the matter. The students are now preparing a strike to ask the government to intervene and give them what they've worked so hard for and spent so much hard-earned money on. In Auckland, for Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
And after we went to air this evening, we received this response from the NZQA. This is an ongoing and complex situation that is being actively managed with the help of other agencies, including Immigration New Zealand and the Public Trust. We appreciate this is a difficult time for the affected students, and our most important consideration is to support them as much as possible. The statement also says those who have paid kite but haven't completed their classes will be refunded. It also gives information on the Samaritans, Lifeline and the Depression Helpline for those who would like to talk to someone confidentially about how they are feeling or if they are concerned about someone else. The death of veteran actor Ray Henwood at age 82 is almost the end of an era, according to playwright and old friend Sir Roger Hall. The Welsh-born actor appeared in many of Sir Roger's plays, including Glide Time, that later morphed into the TV series Gliding On. The actor, with the beautiful voice and wonderful stage presence, had a long and varied career. He played Winston Churchill, featured in Shortland Street, and was forever known as the Morrow Man after starring in a 1969 commercial for the chocolate bar.
A couple of Cadbury's men were talking about their fabulous new chocolate bar Moro, and I said to them, give me 2 weeks and I'll sell every Moro bar in New Zealand. That's where you come in. I wonder if you'd mind eating up every Moro bar in the country, just as a small favour to me. It'll be easy. The beautiful taste of fluffy nougat, soft caramel, smothered in thick, creamy Cadbury chocolate. Let's make this week eat up every Moro week. I'm starting tonight.
And Ray Henwood actually graduated in chemistry at Swansea University and moved to New Zealand at 25. He worked as a teacher and forensic toxicologist before becoming a professional actor. I asked playwright Sir Roger Hall what made Ray Henwood so good.
In many ways, Ray was our Richard Burton. He was Welsh, he was very good looking, he had a wonderful voice. On top of that, he did have a wonderful stage presence and a wonderful sense of timing. He was a thorough professional. I've never known him not know all his lines on opening night. And he was always calm. He was a professional through and through.
So he was in so many of your plays and in pivotal roles as well. Well, I'm wondering, did you write parts with him in mind, or did it just work out that way?
Well, later in life I'll come to that, but yes, I was hugely lucky that in my first 5 plays, Ray was the lead or leading part in 4 of them. Now, when I wrote Glide Time, there was a character called Hugh who came from Wales, and strangely enough, I didn't have Ray in mind, but looking back, he was so obvious. And then he was in Middle Age Spread, and then State of the Play in the lead. But later in life, plays like Who Wants to Be 100 and Last Legs, as I was writing the parts, I thought, oh, this is just right for Ray. And it's a great help when you write it to have somebody in mind for that character, and it's happened. He was in both those plays.
He played a number of diverse roles, because I was just looking back at some of the things. I mean, he was in Shortland Street, I'd forgotten that, and obviously in various Peter Jackson movies, and that Moro ad.
Yes, well, poor. He wasn't allowed to forget that, Ray. Somebody said as a scientist, I think it was Guy Ringer said to him, as a scientist, you shouldn't be doing this. However, he became known as the Morrow Man for quite a long time.
Yeah. Why such a diverse portfolio, do you think?
Well, it's easy to forget that he is a qualified scientist. In terms of so he had a very good background for teaching and things like that. In terms of his different roles, I mean, he played Einstein and Stalin and Churchill, and was convincing as all of them, which is a great tribute. I mean, I saw all those performances, and he was just terrific.
Did you know much of his early career? You mentioned the science there, and he was obviously a chemistry graduate, and I think he came to New Zealand for a job teaching in science. Did you know much about that part of his life?
I got to know him when I was a student at Victoria University, and he was then going out with Caroline, who became his wife, and it was at student parties I got to know him, but he wasn't a student then, and I didn't know him much as an actor. He was also studying in a Long Day's Journey into Night, which was before Circa got established. And that's something else we have to thank him for. He was one of the co-founders of Circa Theatre back in 1976, which was set up to sort of counter Downstage's monopoly. And in the end, in a sense, the tail began to wag the dog because Circa became more successful and has lasted to this very day.
So what do you think his legacy is?
Well, he will be remembered mostly as a very fine actor. Of course, for his film and television performances, but mostly the ones on stage. And that's when he was just held the audience, was always clear, credible, believable. He was, as I say, the consummate professional.
So his death, I imagine, is a significant loss, apart from his friends and family, but to the industry as well.
It's almost the end of an era, that mid-1970s Wellington era. I was very amused to see that one headline said, "Father of Di Henwood dies." And I think he'd be very proud of that. He was very, very proud of Di's success, and so he should be, of course. But I thought that was quite funny that Di has sort of overtaken the father in this particular headline. But we certainly must never forget Ray.
And that was Sir Roger Hall talking about Ray Henwood there. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate all your feedback. We haven't had time to get to it all, but thank you for tuning in. Do check out all our stories online and some of the picture stories that you may have missed while you were listening on the way home. We will be back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister says she still opposes a suicide reduction target, despite the latest stats showing 685 people died by suicide in the year to June. Bolivian President Evo Morales says he's now open to international aid to fight the blazes that have engulfed rural villages and doubled in size since last week. A jury has heard Sir Peter Jackson didn't know one of his vintage planes had been sold until he saw a picture of it in someone else's hangar. And Greenpeace says New Zealand's vote against giving new international protections to mako sharks is difficult to understand. Our next news is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Uncobble will continue despite the pressure from the terrorists.
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
The Papuan struggle for independence, it does tend to get overwhelmed by just the sheer numbers of